Most women who end up in a nursing home didn't choose it. They agreed to it. There's a difference. My daughter sat me down 2 years ago and said, "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation." I knew what was coming. I'm Catherine. I'm 90 years old. And I want to tell you something nobody told me before that conversation happened. You have the right to say no. You have the right to ask questions. You have the right to walk away. But most of us don't know that, because when someone we love frames it as safety, as care, as worry, we fold, not because we want to, because we love them, and we don't want to be a burden. I spent 3 weeks inside a facility before I understood what I'd almost given up without knowing. Before you agree to anything, there are 3 things you must do first. Have you ever been in this situation, or are you worried it might happen? Comment 1 if yes, 0 if not yet. There's something I've noticed talking to women my age. When the conversation about a nursing home comes up, most of us don't fight it. We don't argue. We don't even ask many questions. We just go quiet. And then slowly we say yes. Not because it's what we want, but because we've spent a lifetime learning to say yes when we mean no, especially to the people we love. I want you to understand why this happens, because it isn't weakness, it isn't confusion, it's something much deeper than that. When your child brings up a nursing home, they almost never say, "I don't want to deal with this anymore." They say, "We're worried about you, Mom." They say, "We just want you to be safe." And those words, worried, safe, they land differently when they come from someone you raised. You hear love in them. And because you hear love, you don't push back. You think, "They're doing this for me." You think maybe they're right. You think, "I don't want to cause trouble." Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name is Ruth. She was 78 when her son first brought it up. He lived 4 hours away, called every Sunday, and she always told him she was fine, and she was fine. She cooked her own meals. She walked to the mailbox every morning. She had a neighbor she had coffee with twice a week, but her son had read an article, something about falls in older women, about living alone being a risk factor, and after that, every phone call changed. He started sending her links. He started mentioning a nice place near his house. It was gradual, gentle, patient, and Ruth, because she loved him, because she didn't want him to worry, because she had never in her life wanted to be a burden to anyone, Ruth said yes. She called me the week after she moved in. I still remember what she said. "Catherine, I didn't want to go. I just didn't know I could say no." That sentence has stayed with me for years. I didn't know I could say no. Not because Ruth was confused, not because she was frail, but because nobody had ever told her that her preference, her actual wish to stay in her own home, was a valid reason to refuse. She assumed that once her child decided, the decision was made. She assumed that love meant following along. Here's what I want you to hear. Your child's worry is real. Their love is real. But love does not give someone else the authority to make permanent decisions about your life, not your child, not your doctor, not anyone. The moment you forget that, you stop being a participant in your own story and become a character in someone else's. And that shift from participant to character happens quietly. It happens in the space between "we need to talk" and "okay." It happens when you say yes before you've asked yourself whether yes is what you actually mean. So before we talk about what to do, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Ask yourself, if my child hadn't brought this up, would this thought have ever crossed my mind? If the answer is no, then we have more to talk about. The first thing you must do before you agree to anything, before you visit the facility, before you sit down for that conversation, before you let your child's timeline become your timeline, is ask yourself one honest question, not out loud, not in front of anyone, alone, quietly, when no one is watching. The question is this: am I truly unable to care for myself right now? Or is this my child's fear talking? I know that question sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how few women actually stop to ask it, because by the time the conversation happens, it already feels decided. The paperwork exists. The facility has been toured. Your child has done the research, made the calls, maybe even put down a deposit. And in the middle of all that momentum, your own voice, your own actual assessment of your own life gets quietly pushed aside. So stop and ask. There is a difference between needing support and needing to be placed somewhere. There is a difference between slowing down and losing your independence. There is a difference between your child being worried and you being in genuine danger. Those are not the same thing, and it matters enormously that you know which one is actually true before you make any decision. Let me tell you about someone I know. Her name was Dorothea. She was 81. Sharp, funny, made her own breakfast every morning, walked her small dog every afternoon, called her sister every Sunday without fail. Her daughter lived in another state and carried a steady, low-grade anxiety about her mother living alone. That anxiety was real. But it wasn't about Dorothea's actual condition. It was about distance. It was about the daughter's own fear of receiving a phone call one day that she wasn't prepared for. When the conversation came, Dorothea didn't stop to separate those two things. She heard, "I'm worried about you, Mom," and somewhere inside herself, she translated it into, "You are no longer capable." She wasn't incapable. She was managing her life just fine. But she didn't ask the question. She didn't pause. She moved in within the month. 6 months later, she told me she felt like she had retired from her own life before she was ready to retire. She hadn't lost her mind. She hadn't lost her body. She had lost her mornings, her routines, her small, ordinary choices. And once those were gone, something harder to name went with them. Here is a simple way to check for yourself. 3 questions. Answer them honestly without your child in the room. 1. Can you manage your personal hygiene most days without assistance? 2. Can you move through your home, kitchen, bathroom, front door without serious risk? 3. Can you decide what you eat, when you sleep, and when you step outside, and then actually follow through on those decisions? If the answer to all 3 is yes, you are not in crisis. You may benefit from certain adjustments over time, but you are not someone who needs to be placed somewhere. You are someone whose child is scared, and that is a conversation worth having. But it is a very different conversation from the one being put on the table. Your child's fear is not a diagnosis. Their worry is not a medical evaluation. And their love, as genuine as it is, does not replace your right to assess your own situation honestly. The question is not whether they are worried. The question is whether you need what they are offering. Only you can answer that. Answer it first, before you say anything else. Comment 1 if you feel you could still manage your own life today. Comment 0 if you're not sure. There's no wrong answer here. The second thing you must do, if after asking yourself that honest question you're still open to the conversation, is visit the facility yourself, not with your child. Not with a family member who has already made up their mind. Alone. I cannot tell you how much this matters. When your child takes you on a tour, Everything is curated. The staff know someone is being evaluated. The hallways feel warmer. The activities director appears. Someone offers you coffee. You see what the place wants you to see, filtered through a person whose deep desire is for you to say yes. That is not the same as seeing the place as it actually is. When you go alone, unannounced on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, you see something different. You see the place when it isn't performing. Let me tell you what I saw the first time I went alone to the facility my daughter had chosen. It was a Tuesday, just after 2 in the afternoon. The building was genuinely clean, not staged clean. The floors were polished. There were flowers in the entrance. From any reasonable angle, it looked like a good place. I walked in, said I was considering it for myself, and asked if I could look around. They said yes. I walked slowly. I looked at faces. And in the common room near the back of the building, I saw a woman sitting alone by the window. She was well dressed. Her hair was done. She wasn't in distress. She was just sitting there, looking out at the parking lot. I watched her for a while. No one came to speak to her. No one checked on her. A staff member walked past twice without making eye contact. She sat there for the full 45 minutes I was in the building. That woman was the real tour, not the flowers, not the polished floors. Her. When you visit alone, here is what to pay attention to. First, look at the faces of the people who already live there, not during organized activities, but in between, in the hallways, in the quiet common areas. Do they look like people living their lives, or like people waiting for something to happen? Second, listen to the sounds. A building full of people should carry some noise, conversation, laughter, a television somewhere. Silence in a place like that is not peace, it is absence. Third, watch how the staff speak to the residents. Do they speak to them as adults with opinions and preferences, or do they speak in that careful, slightly elevated tone people use with someone who cannot fully understand them? The tone tells you more than any brochure ever will. Stay for at least an hour. Don't rush. Don't let anyone guide you too efficiently through the highlights. Sit somewhere ordinary and observe. The place will show you who it really is if you give it enough time to stop performing. A clean facility is not the same as a good life. Safety is not the same as freedom. You can live somewhere with excellent ratings, attentive staff, and beautiful grounds, and still feel completely erased. The building cannot tell you whether you will matter there, but the people inside it can if you are paying the right kind of attention. Go alone, see it for yourself. Then decide whether to keep talking. The third thing, and this is the one most women never think to do, is this. If after asking yourself honestly and visiting alone, you are still open to the possibility, make it a trial, a real, clearly defined, time-limited trial, 30 days, and state that condition out loud, plainly, before you agree to anything else. I know what that might feel like. It might feel confrontational. It might feel like starting a negotiation with people who love you, and that sits uncomfortably. But here is what I want you to hold on to. Any decision about where you will live for the rest of your life deserves at minimum 30 days of honest evaluation before it becomes permanent. That is not stubbornness. That is not ingratitude. It is a reasonable request from a person who still has the right to make her own choices. Anyone who genuinely loves you should be able to hear that without taking offense. The words are simple. Practice them before the conversation if you need to. You say, I am willing to try this for 30 days. After 30 days, I will decide what I want to do. Not you, me. That is the agreement I am making. Nothing more. Those two sentences change the entire dynamic of what follows. Instead of walking into a facility as someone who has already surrendered, you walk in as someone who is evaluating. You still hold a position. You still carry a voice. You still have a decision to make at the end of the month. And that difference between surrendering and evaluating will shape how you experience every single day you spend inside those walls. Let me tell you about a woman named Virginia. She was 79 when her family first raised the conversation. Unlike most women I have known in that situation, Virginia paused. She asked herself the honest question first. She visited the facility alone, and when she finally agreed to sit down and talk seriously, she said 5 words: "I need a trial period." Her son pushed back gently. Her daughter looked uncertain. But Virginia held the line quietly, without anger, without drama. 30 days. That is all I am committing to. She moved in. She gave it 30 days with her eyes fully open, observing the rhythms of the place, noticing who she became there, asking herself each morning whether this was a life she could genuinely choose. At the end of 30 days, Virginia decided to stay, not because her children wanted her to, not because it was logistically simpler, but because she had evaluated it on her own terms, and her honest answer was yes. She signed a longer agreement that following week and felt no bitterness, no resentment, no quiet anger, because the decision had belonged to her from the beginning. Now think about what it looks like without the trial. A woman says yes in a moment of exhaustion and love. She does not hold any conditions. She does not ask for time. She moves in, and 3 months later she sits with a feeling she cannot fully name, not anger at the staff, not anger at the building, but something heavier, turned inward. She is angry at herself for not asking, for not holding the line just once on the one decision that mattered above all others. That feeling, that particular quiet weight, is what happens when love makes a decision that should have been made by you. A 30-day trial is not distrust. It is not cruelty toward your family. It is not a sign that you are difficult or ungrateful. It is what a person who still respects herself does before she changes the entire shape of her daily life. You spent decades making your own decisions about money, about the people you let close, about the home you kept, and the life you built inside it. This decision deserves no less thoughtfulness than any of those. 30 days. Then you choose. That is the agreement, and it is enough. Now, let me tell you what happened to me. When my daughter sat me down 2 years ago, I did not say no. I did not say yes. I said, "Let me think about this properly," and then I did the 3 things I just told you about. I asked myself the honest question, and my answer was that I was slower than I used to be, yes, but I was not lost. I went to visit the facility alone on a Wednesday morning. It was a good place. I want to be honest about that. The staff were kind. The rooms had windows. There was a garden. By every visible measure, it was exactly what my daughter had described, and I agreed to try it. 30 days. I was clear about that before I packed a single bag. I lasted 3 weeks, not because the place was unkind, not because anything went wrong, but because somewhere around day 18, I understood something I hadn't been able to put into words before. Every morning I woke up and there was nothing for me to decide, not what to eat. It was on a schedule, not when to go outside. There were times for that. Not even something as small as whether to leave the curtain open or closed. Someone came in and managed the room. Clean, comfortable, completely out of my hands. I had walked into a beautiful place and quietly handed over every small decision that made me feel like myself. And I hadn't noticed it happening until it was already done. I called my daughter on day 18 and told her I was coming home. She was upset. She was worried. We had a hard conversation. But I came home, and the morning after, I made my own coffee, opened my own curtains, and sat in my own chair, and I thought, this is what I almost gave away without realizing its worth. A nursing home is not always the wrong choice. I want to be clear about that. For some women, at some point in their lives, it is the right one, the one that brings genuine safety, genuine companionship, genuine peace. Virginia found that. Others have too. But the difference between choosing it and drifting into it is everything. One leaves you whole, the other leaves you wondering quietly what you gave up before you understood what you had. You are not a problem to be managed. You are not a liability to be placed somewhere safe. You are a person who has lived long enough to know the difference between a comfortable room and a life that belongs to you. So before you agree, ask, visit. Give it 30 days if you decide to try, and at every step, remember that the only voice in that room whose opinion of your life is final is yours. I still make my own coffee every morning. I still decide when to open my curtains. And I am still, at 90, the one who chooses how my day begins. That is not a small thing. That is everything. If this conversation helped you think more clearly today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to keep talking, I will be here. Did you find this helpful? Would you try the 30-day agreement if you were in this situation? Comment 1 for yes, 0 if you would handle it a different way. I'd love to hear from you.